Unlike the last album, where we had an idea of what the sort of subject matter for the songs was going to be and what we wanted it to sound like, this album really started a couple of years ago when we were asked to write some songs with Kylie Minogue, which she didn't actually record in the end. And the first song that was written on the album is a song called Pandemonium. And so it was quite interesting not writing for ourselves but writing things of someone else singing, and we started writing these much more upbeat, poppy kind of songs than we had for the previous album. And when we carried on writing about a year ago, this sort of mood seemed to carry on as well. And also we were trying to a little bit experiment with melodies and chords at the same time, to take pop music and make it slightly dissonant sometimes, or just use slightly different chord changes and stranger chords on some of the music. But we ended up really writing a group of really quite poppy songs, and therefore we decided we would approach the producers Xenomania, because they seemed to us like the most interesting and imaginative pop producers at the moment.
Well, we like Xenomania because they're very fresh sounding, very, very pop. And so the sort of songs we've been writing, it seemed like Xenomania were the perfect choice to produce it.
When we come to a producer's, we always arrive with a demo CD of like 14 or 15 finished songs. But we agreed on this to write 3 songs with them. That was part of the deal, and we wanted to do that to see how they worked. Well, the first time we met Brian Higgins, we went down to his house, which is also the Xenomania studio, in a village in Kent. I like the way he talked about pop music, the way he was interested in really experimenting with pop music, not accepting that there's a defined way you have to go about things. But also he seemed like a very, very, very strong personality, and I think that's quite a good thing in a producer. Chris and I quite like working with someone who very slightly intimidates us. It felt like a good match. But also, you do things maybe you wouldn't already have done, or you wouldn't have done before. Like I was playing the album, it was finished with a friend of mine, and there's a song called The Way It Used to Be, which the melodies are primarily written by Chris, actually, over his Xenomania backing track. But there's a bit that Miranda wrote, "Don't give me all your northern pain," and it so doesn't sound like a Pet Shop Boys melody. In fact, at one point it was going to be a duet. We were going to ask Tina Turner to sing it, because it sounds a bit like Tina to me. And that's good, because it sort of stretches you, brings new things into your vocabulary. And the way they write, which is to finish a whole song and then to start all over again and write different melodies for it and different words, it's very hard work. It's very disciplined, and it's also slightly chaotic, because there's bits of different bits of songs flying around the building, and someone suddenly works on one of the bits and it comes back in. I mean, our way of working would be more superficially much more organised, but that sort of creative chaos and things changing all the time was quite an exhilarating and instructive process. I think the first single, Love Etc., doesn't sound like any... somehow manages to sound like typical Pet Shop Boys without sounding like any record ever made before. And I think it's because it's very much a co-write with Xenomania. The opening melody is written by Miranda Cooper. And it's a beautiful melody. I don't think to me sounds like a Pet Shop Boys melody. The sort of chanty thing is a bit like maybe something we've done before. But it's a very unusual record structurally as well. It's got different bits keep coming in and out. And we said in an interview that it was a post-lifestyle anthem, which was someone actually used that phrase when describing it to us, and we liked it, because the song is really saying, like the Beatles did, all you need is love. It's saying that life isn't just about wealth and shopping.
Xenomania played us a lot of backing tracks, and they also had these other ones that they were sort of keeping back for themselves, that Brian and Miranda were keeping back for themselves. They were going to do sort of their own dance project, and there's one backing track in particular that we both really liked, and we weren't getting offered that one. And in the end, Neil plucked up the courage to say, "Oh, what about that one?" And so they...
Well, Chris kept saying to me in the car on the way to the studio in the morning,
We're not getting the best one.
We're not getting the best one. I want the one with the swing one. I said, I couldn't even remember it, to be honest. And I said, well, you said, you know, dink, dink. I said, oh yeah, it is good, isn't it? I said, right, I'll ask Brian. Brian, can we just hear that swing one again? You know, does it go again? He goes, oh, this one. So yeah, we want that one. And he said, that's for Miranda and I's project, that. And he said, well, I just think it's like an obvious hit, and we're not sure we've written an obvious hit yet. Anyway, they very generously handed over the backing track, and we started working.
Actually, this time, with this album, it's different, because normally what we do is we make the album and then we all talk about what should be the first single. On this occasion, Love Etc. was always going to be the first single, before we'd even finished the album.
And I think the reason for that is that Brian Higgins determined from the moment we got on with it as a song that it was the most commercial thing on the album.
Well, the video for Love Etc. has really come out of the production we're doing for the Brit Awards, because we're working with Ez Devlin again, and she uses these video people called 1.0, and one of their people is Hudebrugger from Holland, and the treatment really is it's animation, and it's sort of based on some sort of primitive video game, and you sort of go to different levels and things, but I think the inspiration for it was the sort of synth electronic riff sound, which sounds almost like it could be from one of those early 80s video games.
I think that and the bounciness of the track, that's why Chris and I appear as, what do you call those bouncing?
Space hoppers.
Space hoppers, yeah. It's very space opera. I don't think albums have to contrast just for the sake of it, but I think it is important that each album has its own identity, and I think all of our albums do have a strong identity, right from the first album to this one. This is our 10th album, amazingly, and I think they all do have this has got a very different identity from the last album, Fundamental. Fundamental was conceived almost as a sort of song cycle, with a beginning, a middle and an end. This album is a collection of pop songs. Funnily enough, there are much weirder things on this album than there were on Fundamental. Like the song Building a Wall, which is really quite an experimental song. King of Rome, which is again a very beautiful song. The final song, Legacy, which I think is a bit opaque for a lot of people, but I think it's very beautiful. And then contrasting that, you've got like Did You See Me Coming, which is sort of hyper pop. Vulnerable, which sounds like it could have been written by whoever wrote Voyage Voyage, another record in the 80s, which was always obsessed us, and it has a very vulnerable kind of melody. The title for the album, when we did Fundamental, we had the title Fundamental right at the beginning. But yes, it seemed so positive. We were thinking of our sentences, you know, like Pet Shop Boys Please, have you got the Pet Shop Boys Please, you know, that kind of thing. And this one is, you know, have you got the new Pet Shop Boys album? Yes, Pet Shop Boys. I don't know, it's sort of funny. Really, it came from Yoko Ono. It came from Yoko Ono's famous artwork, 1967, where John Lennon walked up the step ladders, got the magnifying glass, read the little thing, and it said yes. And he thought, oh, that's positive. And then the rest is history, you know. And then our designers, Farrow, came up with a very simple idea of the tick, you know, yes, tick, which is very graphic. In the single, Love Etc., in the second verse, it mentions the German artist Gerhard Richter, who's one of the greatest living artists of our time. Originally it was Andy Warhol, the Andy Warhol hanging on your wall, so it was almost a sort of rhyme. And then we thought Andy Warhol was a bit corny, and so I sang Gerhard Richter. Now I thought Brian would hate that because it sounds a bit pretentious to me, and he loved it. And also it sings really well, the Gerhard Richter. Consequently, the graphic style of the album is in fact slightly influenced by Gerhard Richter. Every year at the Brits Awards, they give an award for outstanding contribution. And when you've been around for a certain length of time, the record company occasionally mention it to you. And I think we never thought we would get it, really. Because, you know, we didn't think the music industry would regard us as significant enough. And this year, 2009, is 25 years since our first single was released on Epic Records, West End Girls. And I think maybe that was part of it. I also think this is a good time for pop music. And so I think it makes a big change to the Brits that they're giving the Outstanding Contribution Award to a duo who have been strong advocates of pop music for 25 years.
Yeah, no, it's an honour really to be given this award. I mean, I don't really approve of award ceremonies at all, but given that they do exist, it's, you know, it is nice to be recognised, I suppose, really. And I think we're really accepting this award on behalf of pop music more than anything. Very underrated form of music.